There is a specific kind of trance that everyone listening to this has experienced, a hypnotic state that belongs exclusively to the era of the beige box computer. It is the year 1998, or perhaps 2001. You were sitting in a room illuminated only by the radioactive glow of a massive CRT monitor. The hum of the computer tower is a comforting white noise, a mechanical purr that signifies you are connected to the future. But you aren't working. You aren't playing Doom or browsing the early web. You are doing something that seems incomprehensible to the modern mind. You are staring, with mouth slightly open, at a series of 3D pipes constructing themselves in real time. This is the hook of our digital lives. It was the moment the machine began to dream. Do you remember the specific feeling of watching those 3D pipes? It wasn't just a graphic, it was a promise. As the teapots appeared at the joints, a bizarre, whimsical inside joke of computer graphics, you felt a surge of secret knowledge. You were witnessing the computer thinking for itself. In a world before infinite scrolling feeds and constant notifications, we had the patience to watch a digital plumber build a labyrinth to nowhere. This screensaver didn't just save the phosphors on our screens from burning in. It saved our minds from the stillness of the room. It gave us a window into a dimension where physics didn't apply, where geometry was God, and where we could lose ourselves for 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time. That feeling of zoning out was pure, unadulterated peace. It was a meditation we didn't know we were practicing. Let's go deeper into the sensory memory of this moment. Remember the Starfield simulation? It was the simplest of them all, just white pixels moving from the center of the screen outward against a black background. Yet, for millions of us, this was our first experience of space travel. Sitting in your childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters and messy clothes, that screensaver transformed your desk into the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. You weren't just a kid waiting for dinner. You were jumping to hyperspace. The speed could be adjusted. Do you remember that? You could make the stars crawl, or you could make them streak past at terrifying velocities. This control over the universe gave us a feeling of agency and power that we rarely felt in our actual lives. We were the captains of our own boredom. The joy of the Starfield wasn't in the graphics, which were primitive even then. The joy was in the projection. We projected our dreams, our loneliness, and our hopes onto those moving dots. It was a Rorschach test made of light. The feeling of traveling towards something, even if you never arrived, is a core memory of the 90s. We were all moving towards the new millennium, and the Starfield was the visual metaphor for our collective optimism. And then there was the Mystify screensaver, those bouncing, colorful, geometric lines that trailed across the screen like neon spiderwebs. This screensaver triggered a different emotion, a mesmerizing aesthetic satisfaction. Watching the lines bounce off the edges of the screen, changing color from cyan to magenta to lime green, felt like watching a digital ballet. It was perfectly logical, yet totally random. For a generation raised on chaos, seeing something so orderly was deeply soothing. We stared at it while talking on the landline cord, twisting the wire around our fingers, discussing school drama or crushes. The screensaver was the background visual to the soundtrack of our social lives. It was the digital campfire we stared into while we bonded with our friends. The memory of that specific, glowing geometry is inextricably linked to the feeling of comfort. It was the visual equivalent of a warm blanket. We didn't need 4K resolution. We needed the hypnotic repetition to calm our anxious, developing brains. It was a safe space where nothing bad could happen. A loop of beauty that existed solely for our amusement. Think about the context of the maze. Before we get to the fear of it, remember the anticipation. You would sit there, hands off the keyboard and mouse, waiting for the timer to trigger. That waiting period was its own unique emotion, a mixture of patience and excitement. You knew that, if you touched the mouse, even a millimeter, the magic would break. You had to be perfectly still. This required a physical discipline that we have completely lost today. We taught ourselves to be statues just to witness the spectacle of the idle screen. That shared discipline connects us all. We all held our breath, watching the Windows logo bounce or the pipes grow, terrified that a sibling or a parent would bump the desk and shatter the illusion. The joy of the screensaver was fragile. It existed only in the absence of interaction. This creates a poignant paradox. We loved these animations, but to see them, we had to leave them alone. It was a lesson in letting go. It was a lesson that beauty sometimes requires our absence. That specific melancholy of watching a world that exists only when you aren't participating in it is a profound emotional texture of the era. Finally, the hook of the screensaver era rests on the concept of burn-in. We were told with grave seriousness by our parents and teachers that if we left a static image on the screen, it would be ghosted there forever. This technical limitation created a legitimate, low-grade fear in all of us. The screensaver was our protector. It was the shield against permanent damage. Every time the flying toasters appeared or the scrolling marquee began, we felt a wave of relief. The monitor is safe. The computer is okay. We anthropomorphized these machines. We didn't want them to get hurt. That care, that worry we felt for a piece of hardware, speaks to how precious technology was to us. It wasn't disposable like it is today. It was a member of the family. The screensavers was the heartbeat that told us the machine was sleeping soundly. Looking back, that anxiety about burn-in seems silly, but at the moment, it was real. It was a shared responsibility. We were the guardians of the glass, and the screensaver was our weapon. If the pipes and stars were the dream, the Windows 95 3D maze was the nightmare. This is the rising action of our collective memory, where the passive observation turned into active, psychological engagement. You remember the maze. We all remember the maze. It was a low-resolution, brick-walled labyrinth that the camera navigated automatically. But it wasn't just a wall. It was a textured reality that felt impossibly vast. The rising action here is the introduction of anxiety into the idle experience. As the camera turned a corner, your stomach would drop. What was down that hallway? Why was the ceiling that strange, psychedelic pattern? The feeling wasn't pure horror, but a specific kind of liminal uneasiness. We were trapped in a loop. We couldn't control the direction. We were passengers in a vehicle driven by an algorithm. That loss of control, combined with the claustrophobic graphics, tapped into our childhood fears of getting lost in a grocery store or a strange building. We watched it with a mixture of dread and fascination, unable to look away. Then there was the rat. Or was it a smiley face? The customization options allowed us to change the textures, and suddenly the walls were made of weird, floating icons. This absurdity didn't make it funnier. It made it more surreal. The rising action of the screensaver era was about customization. We started to inject our own personalities into the void, changing the walls to a psychedelic swirl or a picture of our dog was our first taste of digital modding. It brought a fierce joy. Look, I made the maze look like pizza. But beneath that joy was still the uncanny valley of the simulation. We remember the feeling of showing our friends our custom maze. It was a badge of honor. Check out how fast I made it go. We bonded over the dizziness. We dared each other to watch it without vomiting. The physical sensation of motion sickness, induced by a 15-inch monitor, is a shared physical memory. It was our first roller coaster ride that didn't require a ticket, just a right-click properties. Let's talk about the flying toasters from After Dark. This was the peak of absurdist humor, and it represented a shift in the emotional landscape. Suddenly, screensavers weren't just functional. They were funny. They were cultural currency. Seeing those winged kitchen appliances flapping across the screen alongside pieces of toast triggered a specific kind of delight, the joy of nonsense. In a world of strict school rules and serious news, the flying toasters were anarchy. They made no sense, and that was why we loved them. It was a shared joke that everyone with a Mac, or the PC port, was in on. The rising action here is the realization that the computer could be whimsical. It didn't have to be a tool for math homework. It could be a theater for winged appliances. We remember the sound, the flapping, the humming music. It brings back the feeling of Saturday morning cartoons. It brings back the safety of a world where the biggest problem was whether your toast was burnt. It was pure, unadulterated innocence packaged as software. The rising action also involves the haunted house screensaver. Do you remember the ones that were actual scenes? A spooky mansion, a lightning storm, eyes glowing in the dark. These were the premium experiences. We would sit in the dark, usually during a sleepover, and treat the screensaver like a horror movie. Did you see that ghost? I saw a shadow move. We projected our own narratives onto the loop. The fear we felt wasn't real danger. It was safe fear. It was the thrill of the spooky, experienced from the safety of an office chair. We huddled together, pointing at the screen, creating myths about what would happen if you watched it for an hour. My cousin said if you watch it for 60 minutes, a skeleton jumps out. These urban legends were the folklore of the digital age. We bonded over lies we wanted to believe. The screensaver became a storyteller, and we were the rapt audience, suspended in a state of delightful terror. Finally, the rising action of this era is defined by the Johnny Castaway screensaver. This was a narrative. A little man stranded on a desert island. He fished, he built fires, he tried to escape. We watched him for hours, not because we had to, but because we felt empathy. This is the critical emotional shift. We started to care about the pixels. We felt sad when his raft broke. We felt happy when he caught a fish. He was the first Tamagotchi experience for many of us, but we couldn't help him. We could only watch. This created a feeling of helpless affection. We were gods looking down on a tiny, trapped human. The loneliness of Johnny Castaway mirrored our own teenage loneliness. We too felt stranded on an island, the island of our bedroom, the island of adolescence. Watching him survive gave us hope that we could survive too. The connection was real. When we turned the computer off, we wondered, is he sleeping? Is he okay? That capacity to love a screensaver proves how desperate we were for connection, and how the window to nowhere actually became a mirror to our own hearts. The conflict of the screensaver era didn't happen in the privacy of our homes. It happened on the battlefield of the school computer lab. This is where the screensaver became a weapon of social warfare. The 3D text, or Scrolling Marquee screensaver, was the primary tool. You remember the interface, a simple text box where you could type anything. This was the conflict. The temptation to type something forbidden was overwhelming. We all remember the adrenaline spike of typing Mr. Johnson smells, or I hate math, and setting the timer to 1 minute. Then you would walk away. You would leave the grenade to explode. The conflict was between the authority of the school and the rebellion of the student. Watching that text spin in glorious neon 3D, bouncing off the walls of the screen, was a moment of supreme triumph. It was graffiti that vanished with the wiggle of a mouse. We felt like hackers. We felt like spies. The fear of getting caught was spicy and addictive. It was a safe rebellion, a way to scream in a room where we were forced to be silent. But the conflict went deeper. It was about ownership. In a computer lab, the machines didn't belong to us. We were guests. By changing the screensaver, we were claiming territory. This is my computer for the next 45 minutes. We remember the frustration when we sat down at a computer and someone else had locked the screensaver settings with a password. That grayed out settings button was the ultimate defeat. It was a barrier between us and our expression. We felt a genuine anger, a childish sense of injustice. Why can't I make the text spin? That petty conflict is a core memory of the lack of control we felt as kids. We wanted to customize our world, and the adults were stopping us. The screensaver settings menu was the front line of the generational war. We tried to guess the password. We tried to hack the registry, if we were the smart kids. The drive to change that idle screen was a drive to assert our existence in a system that treated us like numbers. There was also the conflict of privacy versus showing off. You wanted a cool screensaver to impress the kids sitting next to you. If you had the Matrix Code rain screensaver, the ultimate symbol of coolness, in 1999, you were the king of the lab. But you also wanted to hide what you were doing. The boss key, or the screensaver password, was used to hide games when the teacher walked by. The screensaver became a curtain. We remember the panic. The teacher is coming down the row. You are playing Quake. You slam your hand on the keyboard to trigger the screensaver, if you had a hotkey, or just pray it activates. The conflict between the forbidden game and the innocent screensaver was palpable. When the teacher walked past and saw only Mystify bouncing on the screen, the relief was physical. We held our breath, our hearts pounding against our ribs. The screensaver was our accomplice. It lied for us. That shared deceit bonded us with the machine. We were partners in crime. Then there was the conflict of the prank, the blue screen of death, BSOD screensaver. This was pure evil, and we loved it. Installing a screensaver that looked exactly like a system crash on a friend's computer was the peak of 90s humor. We watched from across the room as they sat down, wiggled the mouse, and nothing happened. Or the fake error message appeared. The look of panic on their face was delicious. But then the conflict of guilt set in. Did we go too far? What if they restart the computer and lose their essay? We remember that teeter-tottering feeling between being a prankster and being a jerk. The relief when we finally told them it's just a screensaver, and they laughed or punched us on the arm. That laughter was relief. It was the breaking of tension. These pranks were our way of testing boundaries, of exploring the limits of trust. The screensaver was the medium for our social experiments. Finally, the conflict was simply the battle against boredom. The school day was long. The lectures were dry. The screensaver was the only moving thing in a stagnant room. We remember staring at the corner of the screen, waiting for the DVD logo to hit the corner. We will get to that. Or watching the text scroll, just to keep our brains from turning to mush. The conflict was, I need stimulation, but I am stuck here. The screensaver was the lifeline. It was the only color in a beige world. We projected our desire to be anywhere else onto those floating shapes. We hated the school, but we loved the screen. That dichotomy, hating the place but loving the window, is the definition of the screensaver experience in a public setting. It was a portal we couldn't step through, a taunt of freedom that remained just out of reach, spinning endlessly behind a layer of glass we were afraid to touch. The comeback arrived with the era of high-fidelity, living screensavers. This was when the screensaver stopped being a utility and started being a destination, specifically the aquarium. We all remember the Marine Aquarium screensaver. It was photorealistic for the time. The bubbles made a sound. The fish moved with artificial intelligence. This is the comeback because it brought a sense of peace back to the experience. We didn't watch it for excitement. We watched it for therapy. Coming home from a stressful day at middle school, throwing your backpack on the floor, turning on the PC, and just letting the fish swim. It was a digital tranquilizer. We remember the specific sound of the virtual bubbles. Bloop, bloop, hiss. It was white noise for the soul. We felt a genuine sense of ownership over these digital pets. We named them. That's the fast one. That's the shy one. The comeback was the realization that the computer could be a source of nature, even if it was fake. It was a window to an ocean we couldn't visit. This era also brought the fireplace screensaver. In the cold of winter, or in the loneliness of a basement bedroom, that crackling digital fire offered a placebo warmth. We huddled around the monitor like our ancestors huddled around a cave fire. It sounds sad now, but at the time, it was cozy. We remember the feeling of wrapping a blanket around our shoulders, drinking hot cocoa, and watching the looped video of the logs burning. It connected us to a primal human need for warmth and light. The comeback was the ability of the screen to simulate home. Even if our real home was loud or chaotic, the screen was a controlled environment of comfort. We could mute the world and turn up the volume of the crackling fire. That control was the ultimate luxury. We were curating our atmosphere. We felt safe, protected by the glow of the monitor, basking in the light of a fire that could never burn us. The comeback also introduced the photo slideshow screensaver. This was the moment nostalgia began to eat itself. We scanned physical photos or downloaded pictures of our friends and family, and the computer shuffled them. Watching your own memories drift across the screen, Ken Burns style, created a new layer of emotion. It was no longer a window to nowhere. It was a window to yesterday. We sat there and watched pictures of a vacation from 2 years ago, or a pet that had passed away. The screensaver became a memorial. We remember the sting of tears, seeing a photo we had forgotten about. The computer was forcing us to remember. It was an ambient reminder of who we were. This shifted the relationship from passive observation to active reminiscence. The joy of seeing a funny picture of your friends pop up unexpectedly was a hit of dopamine. "I remember that day," we would whisper to the empty room. The comeback was the integration of our real lives into the digital idle state. There was also the SETI home phenomenon. This is a crucial part of the comeback. We weren't just watching pretty shapes, we were helping aliens. Or curing cancer with folding a home. The screensaver became purposeful. We felt a surge of civic pride and scientific wonder. My computer is analyzing radio telescope data while I sleep. We remember the complex graphs and data charts that meant nothing to us, but looked important. We felt like we were part of something bigger than ourselves. We were contributing to the future of humanity by doing absolutely nothing. That feeling of importance, that our idle time was valuable, was a powerful drug. We left our computers on overnight, listening to the fans whir, imagining that our PC would be the one to find the signal. It connected us to a global community of dreamers. We weren't alone in the dark. We were part of a massive, distributed brain. Finally, the comeback was the music visualizer. Windows Media Player, or Winamp. It wasn't strictly a screensaver, but it functioned as one. The psychedelic waves that moved to the beat of our MP3s. We remember staring at those fractals for hours, listening to Linkin Park or Britney Spears. The visual connection to the music made the songs feel deeper, more intense. We felt like we were seeing the music. It was a sensory synesthesia, available to everyone. We invited friends over just to watch the visualizer. Look how it explodes when the bass drops. We felt a collective euphoria, a trance state induced by bad techno and swirling colors. The comeback was the celebration of art and music, merged into one hypnotic loop. We were lost in the rhythm, lost in the colors, and we never wanted to be found. It was the closest we got to a spiritual experience in front of a Dell Dimension desktop. The second rising action is built around a single, collective obsession. The DVD logo corner hit. This is the stuff of legends. It represents the final era of the screensaver before its decline. You know the scene. You are in a classroom, or a waiting room, or a conference room. The DVD player is idle. The logo is bouncing. Bowing. 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 It hits the wall. It hits the floor. But it never hits the corner perfectly. This is the rising action of anticipation. The entire room enters a silent pact. We are all watching. We are all waiting. The teacher is talking about algebra, but nobody is listening. We are calculating trajectories. It's gonna hit. No, it missed. We remember the collective holding of breath. The tension is palpable. It is the most boring sport in the world, yet it is the most gripping. Why did we care? Because we wanted perfection. In a chaotic, messy world, we wanted to see the math work out. We wanted the satisfaction of the perfect slot. Then it happens. The logo glides towards the corner. The angle looks right. The speed is right. The rising action peaks. It hits. The corner changes color perfectly. The logo bounces back. And inside our heads, or sometimes out loud, the crowd goes wild. Yes! We remember that surge of irrational victory. We felt like we won the lottery. We looked around at strangers and shared a smile. Did you see that? That moment of connection born from pure boredom, is the beauty of the screensaver era. It united us in the mundane. It proved that humans can find joy in the smallest, most repetitive things. We were easily amused, yes, but we were also finding community in the silence. We all wanted the corner hit. We all wanted the impossible to happen. But this rising action is also the beginning of the end. We started to notice that screens were changing. LCDs were replacing CRTs. Burn-in wasn't really a thing anymore, not in the same way. The screensaver became less necessary. It became a relic. We remember the transition, the no-signal floating box. It wasn't art. It was an error message. The magic was fading. The computer was becoming a purely utilitarian tool. We stopped customizing the maze and started just letting the screen go black to save power. The rising action here is the realization of loss. We were growing up, and so was the technology. The whimsy was being optimized out. We felt a subtle sadness when Windows XP was replaced by Vista or 7, and the old familiar screensavers were hidden or removed. Where did the pipes go? Where are the toasters? We felt like our childhood toys were being thrown away by the operating system. We also remember the photos replacing the art. As social media rose, the screensaver just became a slideshow of our Facebook photos. It wasn't a window to nowhere anymore. It was a mirror of our curated lives. The fantasy was gone. The rising action of anxiety returns here, seeing a photo of an ex or a bad haircut pop up on the screen. The idle screen became a minefield of memories we might not want to see. We lost the neutrality of the Starfield. We lost the safe space of the abstract. We felt exposed. The screen was no longer a place to dream. It was a place to remember reality. And reality was often stressful. The escape hatch was welded shut. Finally, the second rising action is the sleep mode. The screen just turning off. Click. Blackness. No transition. No fanfare. Just death. We remember the first time we set our computer to turn off display after 5 minutes, instead of screensaver. It felt like a betrayal. We were choosing efficiency over beauty. We were becoming adults. We saved a few cents on the electric bill, but we lost the fish tank. We lost the maze. That quiet click of the monitor turning off is the sound of the era ending. We felt a coldness. The machine wasn't dreaming anymore. It was just dead. We sat in the dark, and there was no glow to keep us company. The rising action creates a tension of absence. We missed the light. We missed the motion. We realized that the silence of the black screen was far lonelier than the silence of the 3D pipes. Here is the payoff. Look at your phone right now. Look at your laptop. What happens when you stop using them? They go black. They become dark mirrors reflecting your own tired face. The window to nowhere has been boarded up. We live in an era of always on or totally off. There is no middle ground anymore. There is no idle dreaming. The payoff is the realization that the screensaver wasn't just software. It was permission to do nothing. When the flying toasters were on, it meant you were taking a break. It meant the computer was taking a break. It was a shared pause in the productivity. Now, we are never allowed to pause. If the screen is on, we must be scrolling, clicking, working, consuming. We have lost the art of staring into space. We miss the screensavers not because of the graphics. Let's be honest, the graphics were terrible, but because of the headspace they represented. We miss the feeling of being 12 years old, sitting in a swivel chair, spinning in circles, while the Starfield stretched into infinity. We missed the feeling of safety. The screensaver was a nightlight for the digital generation. It told us that the world was still there, humming along, even if we weren't doing anything. It validated our boredom. Today, boredom is treated like a disease to be cured by TikTok or Instagram. But back then, boredom was a canvas. The screensaver was the painting on that canvas. We remember the peace of just watching the lines bounce. We yearn for that peace. We crave the ability to just be, without an algorithm feeding us content. The payoff is also in the resurrection. We see looping backgrounds on YouTube now. We see lo-fi hip-hop radio with its repeating animation. What are those? They are the new screensavers. We are desperately trying to recreate what we lost. We are building new aquariums because the silence of the black screen is too loud. We realize that we need the window to nowhere. We need a place for our eyes to rest, so our minds can wander. We're downloading apps that simulate the DVD corner hit. We are nostalgic for the loading screen. This proves that the human soul needs idleness. We cannot run at 100% efficiency forever. We need the pipes. We need the maze. And think about the ghosts, the pixels that didn't burn in. Those screensavers did their job. They protected the machines we loved, but they also protected us. They protected our imagination. They gave us a private universe where we could be space captains, maze runners, and deep-sea divers, all without leaving our messy bedrooms. The memory of the screensaver is the memory of pure potential. It is the memory of a future that looked bright, colorful, and endless. It is a memory of a time before the internet became a job, when it was still a playground. So, the next time your phone screen goes black and you see your own reflection staring back, close your eyes. Summon the pipes. Summon the stars. Remember the hum of the CRT. Feel the static electricity on the glass. You are back there. You are safe. The maze is waiting for you, and this time, you know the way out. But maybe, just maybe, you don't want to leave. Maybe you just want to watch the walls change color for a little while longer. And that is okay. You are allowed to dream. The window is still open, if you know where to look.